Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
The rain was pounding so hard on my old Ford F-150 that the wipers might as well have been broken. I pulled into the elementary school parking lot in Gresham, squinting through the streaked windshield. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I figured it was Rachel, probably reminding me to grab milk on the way home, or maybe something about Evan's Lego set he'd been showing off all week. Instead, the text on the screen made my chest seize up. Moving to Barcelona with Mark. Transferred all our savings. Good luck with bills. I read it 3 times before the meaning hit. Rachel, my wife of 11 years, wasn't just leaving me. She was leaving Evan, like he was nothing more than a suitcase she didn't have room for. We'd saved $36,000 over the years. Every extra job I picked up, every holiday bonus I squirreled away, all of it gone. I opened the banking app with shaking hands. The balance stared back at me. $730. That was it. Our mortgage payment, $1,850, was due in 5 days. I sat there gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My breath was ragged, like someone had kicked the air out of me. I tried to think of something to do, some next step, but my mind was blank. Evan was inside that school right now, probably smiling, telling his friends about the super spaceship he built out of Legos. He had no idea his mom had just blown our lives apart. I pictured Rachel's face when we first met, back at that trade expo in Seattle 12 years ago. She was standing at a booth, flipping through brochures, her hair tucked behind her ears. I was this young electrician with big dreams and an empty apartment, and she felt like the answer to everything. I used to think she'd be the last person to ever walk away from me. From us. The phone slipped out of my hand and hit the floorboard. A horn blared nearby, snapping me out of it. I grabbed the phone again and scrolled through old texts from Rachel. Nothing. No hint of this. But then I remembered how she'd been working late more often these past few months. How she started locking her phone. My stomach turned cold. She planned this. Not for days, for months. I could see it now, all the pieces falling into place. I looked at the school entrance. I had to go get Evan. No matter what just happened, he was still counting on me to be dad. I wiped my face with my sleeve, put the truck in park, and tried to steady my breathing. The truth hit me like another punch. This wasn't just another bad day. This was the day everything changed. I walked into the school lobby dripping wet, my boots squishing with every step. A couple of parents gave me quick glances, probably wondering why I looked like I'd just crawled out of a storm drain. I spotted Evan at the end of the hallway, his backpack bouncing as he ran toward me. His face lit up like nothing was wrong in the world. "Dad, did you bring the gummy bears?" he asked, out of breath but grinning. I forced a smile and nodded. "We'll grab some on the way home, buddy. How was your day?" He launched into a story about building a super cool Lego castle during art time, his hands flailing around as he explained every tower and bridge. I nodded in all the right places, but my mind was elsewhere. I could barely feel my legs, like I was moving on autopilot. On the drive home, the rain thudded against the windshield, blurring everything. Evan hummed softly in the back seat, then asked, "Is Mom making spaghetti tonight?" The words hit me like another punch. I gripped the wheel tighter and tried to keep my voice steady. "Mom's on a trip for a little while. We'll make something else tonight, okay?" He didn't question it. He just nodded, turning his attention to the window, his breath fogging the glass as he traced shapes with his finger. I swallowed hard, praying he couldn't hear how tight my throat felt. By the time we got home, the storm had eased, but inside the apartment, everything felt heavier. I set Evan up in front of the TV, flipping to his favorite cartoon. "I'll be right here if you need me," I said, ruffling his hair. In the kitchen, I grabbed my phone and dialed the bank. My voice sounded hollow as I explained the situation. The rep confirmed what I already knew. Rachel had cleaned out the savings account. "I'm sorry, sir, but the transactions were authorized," the woman on the line said. "There's nothing we can reverse." I stared at the chipped paint on the kitchen wall. "So that's it?" I asked. She apologized again, but it didn't matter. The call ended, and I just stood there, the silence pressing in. Evan's laughter from the living room snapped me out of it. He was giggling at some silly cartoon character, and it cut through me like glass. I wanted to sit next to him and laugh too, but all I could think about was the mortgage due in 5 days and the $730 left in our account. I sank onto a stool, my mind drifting back to when I first met Rachel 12 years ago. I'd been at a trade expo in Seattle, young and clueless, showing off some new electrical tools like they were the most exciting thing in the world. Rachel had walked up, holding a free tote bag and asking questions with this easy confidence. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Someone who saw more in me than just another blue-collar guy. For years, I believed she was my bright future. Now I wasn't sure who I'd been married to all this time. The phone rang again, and I jumped. It was Denise, Rachel's mom. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was like a knife. "What did you do to Rachel? She says you threatened her. Are you trying to keep Evan from her unless she gives you more money?" "What? No. Denise, she left me with nothing. She drained our account." "Don't you dare blame her," Denise snapped. "You always were the problem." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. My chest was tight, anger and fear mixing like poison. Rachel wasn't just gone. She was already painting me as the villain. I looked at Evan on the couch, his little legs curled up, completely unaware. I knew I had to hold it together. For him. But I could already see Rachel's plan taking shape, and I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. The phone rang again the next morning, and I almost didn't answer. I didn't have the energy for another argument. But when I saw Denise's name, I knew she wouldn't stop until I picked up. "Rachel says you're blocking her from Evan unless she pays you more money," she snapped before I could even say hello. Her voice was sharp, cutting through me like broken glass. "What? That's insane. Denise, she left us with nothing. She drained—" "Don't you lie to me," she cut in. "Rachel told me you've been threatening her. She's scared of you. I should have known you'd turn out like this." I stared at the wall, my jaw tight. "She ran off with some guy named Mark. She took all our savings. And you're calling me the problem?" "You've always been beneath her," Denise said, each word dripping with contempt. "She's better off without you. Evan will be too, once we figure out custody." Custody. The word knocked the air out of me. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice low. "You heard me," she replied, her tone almost gleeful now. "Rachel doesn't want Evan around someone unstable." That was it. I hung up before I said something I'd regret, but my hands were trembling. It wasn't just about money anymore. Rachel and Denise were already plotting to take my son. When I walked back into the living room, Evan was sitting cross-legged on the floor, coloring a picture of a rocket ship. He hummed softly, completely unaware of the war brewing around him. I crouched down next to him, trying to steady my breathing. "Dad, can we make pancakes later?" he asked, smiling up at me. "Yeah, buddy, we can do that," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. But inside, my chest felt like it was caving in. That night, after Evan went to bed, I called an old friend, Jason, who used to work with Rachel. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to explain that Rachel had left and I needed to know what she'd been up to. He sighed heavily on the other end. "Man, I hate to tell you this, but she quit her job 2 weeks ago. Said she was moving out of the country. Everyone thought she'd already left," he told me. 2 weeks ago. That meant this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. I sat there, staring at the blank TV screen, wondering how I'd missed all the signs. The next morning, I tried to put on a brave face for Evan. I made him pancakes, added chocolate chips like he liked, but my mind was racing the entire time. Every detail of the past year replayed in my head. Rachel's late-night phone calls she'd take in the other room. The way she'd started looking through me instead of at me. The nights she claimed she was too tired to talk about anything. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. A certified letter. I signed for it, my stomach twisting even before I saw the sender's name. Rachel. I tore the envelope open at the kitchen table. Inside were divorce papers, already filled out, already stamped with her new address in Barcelona. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. She wasn't just leaving me. She'd already made me into a footnote, someone she used to know. I sat there for a long time, staring at the papers while Evan played with his trucks in the other room. Rachel was a step ahead of me, framing me as unstable, setting up her perfect life across the ocean. And me? I was just a guy sitting in an empty apartment, wondering how to fight back. By the second night, the anger burned hotter than the grief. I couldn't just sit around waiting for Rachel to destroy what was left of my life. If she wanted to paint me as the unstable dad, I needed proof of who she really was. When Evan finally fell asleep, I started going through the drawers in our bedroom. Most of Rachel's clothes were gone, but she'd left behind piles of old mail, receipts, and notebooks. My hands were shaking, not just from anger, but from the sick feeling that I might find something that would make all of this real. Then I saw it. A card tucked under a stack of magazines. It was a thank you note addressed to Denise, dated 3 months ago. Rachel's handwriting jumped off the page. Thank you for helping with the down payment on the Barcelona condo. I couldn't have done this without you. I know Evan will have a better life there. My stomach turned. Denise hadn't just known. She'd bankrolled Rachel's escape. I snapped photos of the card and every other piece of paper that mentioned Barcelona. If I was going to fight for Evan, I needed all the ammunition I could get. I pulled out my phone and called a number I'd found earlier that day. A family attorney named Nate Bowen, recommended by a neighbor. I half expected him to sound bored or rushed, but instead, his voice was calm, like he'd heard stories like mine too many times. First things first, Nate said after I told him everything. What Rachel did, draining your joint account, isn't necessarily illegal. But her abandoning your child, that's a different story. Especially if she's planning to leave the country without custody arrangements. She's already gone, I said, my voice tight. And her mother's acting like I'm the bad guy. Good, Nate replied. Then we use that. Every text, every piece of evidence you have, it all matters. Start documenting everything. And don't talk to her or Denise unless it's written down. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of papers I'd pulled from Rachel's drawers. Every receipt and note felt like a clue to a life I hadn't realized she was building. A life where Evan and I weren't even a footnote. I thought about the first year of our marriage, back when we were scraping by in a tiny Portland apartment. We'd talked about saving for a house, for Evan's future, for everything we dreamed of doing together. Now, all of that work, every hour I'd spent wiring houses and crawling through attics, had been funneled into a condo in a city I'd never even visited. I couldn't afford to stay heartbroken. I had to switch gears, from a husband left behind to a father in survival mode. Rachel could take my savings, but she wasn't taking my son. Before going to bed, I organized every photo I'd taken and backed them up in 3 different places. My laptop, a USB drive, and an email to myself. I wasn't losing this evidence. Not when it could mean the difference between keeping Evan or watching him disappear across an ocean. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of purpose. Rachel thought she'd cornered me, but she hadn't counted on me fighting back. The next morning, I decided to call Rachel's brother Dan. We weren't close. He'd always kept his distance, probably because Denise had made it clear I wasn't good enough for their family. But I needed answers. If anyone knew what Rachel was planning, it would be him. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice cautious. Hey, I figured you'd call me sooner or later. Dan, I said, cutting to the chase, do you know what's going on? Rachel didn't just leave. She drained everything. She's in Spain with that guy, Mark. Please tell me you knew nothing about this. There was a long pause. I could hear him exhale, like he'd been holding his breath for months. Look, man. I didn't want to get involved. But yeah, I knew. She told me a while back. I thought she'd at least talk to you before running off. I felt my grip on the phone tighten. She planned this? For how long? Dan's voice dropped almost like he was ashamed. Months. Maybe since last winter. She and Mark were talking about getting a place over there. She said she'd send for Evan later, once things were settled. The words, send for Evan later, made my stomach churn. She's not taking my kid, I said flatly. I don't agree with what she's doing, Dan admitted. But she swore this was for the best. Said you were struggling since that layoff last year. You know how Mom's been talking about that. She's trying to make me look unstable, I snapped. Like I can't take care of my own son. I'm sorry, he muttered. I didn't think it would go this far. That night, after Evan was asleep, I opened the laptop Rachel and I used to share. I went through the email drafts folder, half expecting nothing, but there it was. An unsent email to a recruiter in Barcelona, thanking them for a job offer. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. She had lined up a new life before she even said goodbye. I forwarded everything to Nate. When I called him, I could hear the click of his keyboard as I spoke. "This changes things," he said. "If she's abandoned the household and emptied joint funds, we can file for emergency custody. I'll also work on freezing any remaining assets. She doesn't get to run off and pretend Evan doesn't exist." I hung up, feeling like I'd finally stopped drowning. For the first time since that awful text, I had a plan. The next day, my parents called from Salem. They had already heard pieces of the story. News like this travels fast in families. My mom's voice was soft, but worried. "We can help with the mortgage, at least for now," she said. "Don't let Rachel bully you into thinking you're not a good dad." "Thanks," I managed, my throat tightening. I can't believe she'd do this to Evan." "Focus on him," my dad added. "Let the rest of it burn. He's what matters." After the call, I went back to the laptop. Something told me to keep digging. I found a hidden folder buried under work documents. Old messages between Rachel and Denise. The more I read, the colder I felt. They were discussing my layoff last year, calling me unstable and broke, saying it would be easy to make me look like I couldn't handle custody if things went south. It was like the floor dropped out beneath me. All those months I'd been blaming myself for the layoff, thinking Rachel's distance was about me not pulling my weight. And here she was, twisting my worst moment into a weapon. I backed up every single message and sent them straight to Nate. Rachel had started a war, and for the first time, I felt ready to fight back. The call came late on a Wednesday, just as I'd managed to get Evan to bed. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. "Is this Rachel's husband?" a woman's voice asked, tense but steady. I hesitated. "Who's asking?" "My name's Laura. I'm Mark's ex, or I guess, one of them." She let out a bitter laugh. "I thought you should know. He's screwing you over, too." My stomach sank. "You need to explain that." "Rachel and Mark," she said, her voice sharp. "They've been funneling money into a Cayman Islands account. I found the wire transfers while going through Mark's old emails, over $120,000. I figured you'd want proof." I gripped the phone like it was the only thing holding me upright. "You're serious? You can prove this?" "I'll send you screenshots. I don't owe Mark anything anymore, especially after what he pulled with me. It's time someone burned his little scheme down." Within an hour, my email was full of files. Bank statements, travel records, emails with Rachel's name all over them. I forwarded everything to Nate. The next morning, Nate called. "This is gold," he said, his voice practically humming with energy. "Not only can we prove abandonment, we can nail her for financial misconduct. We'll start freezing whatever accounts we can trace. Keep everything Laura sent you. And don't talk to Rachel. Let her think you're powerless." I was still processing when Rachel finally texted, her message dripping with venom. "Stop harassing my contacts. You're not going to ruin what I've built." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking, but I didn't reply. For the first time since she left, I felt like I had leverage. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. 2 days later, Nate called again, his tone darker this time. "Something new came up. Rachel's employer in Barcelona got emails supposedly from you. Angry, threatening emails. They think you're trying to sabotage her job." "What?" I nearly dropped the phone. "I didn't send anything." "I know, but someone's pretending to be you. My guess? Denise. If we can prove that, it'll destroy their credibility in court." I ran my hand through my hair, pacing the kitchen. "She's trying to make me look like a stalker. Unbelievable." "It's desperate," Nate said, "which means they're cracking. Keep calm and let me handle this." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my laptop. Evan's crayons were scattered across the table from earlier. His little drawings of rocket ships and dinosaurs a reminder of what I was fighting for. Rachel could burn every bridge between us, but she wasn't taking my son. The next morning, Laura called again. I thought you should know. Mark's telling people Rachel's using Evan as leverage against you. He brags about it like it's some big game. You need to crush them before they crush you. I thanked her, my jaw tight. Every piece of evidence she sent made Rachel's story fall apart just a little more. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't cornered. I had people, Nate, Laura, even Dan, who were willing to tell the truth. Rachel and Denise might have started this war, but I was done being the guy they could walk all over. The Multnomah County Courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and rain. I sat beside Nate Bowen, my hands gripping my knees, while Evan's crayon drawings peeked from my folder like tiny reminders of why I was here. Across the aisle, Rachel sat in a navy blazer, her hair pinned back like she was auditioning for sainthood. Her lawyer leaned over, whispering in her ear, both of them wearing that smug, "we've already won" look. The judge entered, and the air shifted. Rachel's lawyer wasted no time painting me as a bitter, unemployed dad who couldn't handle his own household. He spoke about my layoff last year, how I'd supposedly struggled to pay bills, and even hinted I was emotionally volatile. Nate let him finish, then calmly stood. "Your Honor," he began, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet, "let's talk about the offshore account." He laid out the bank records Laura had given us, transfers to a Cayman Islands account, with Rachel and Mark's names on the paperwork. The courtroom murmured. Rachel's lawyer tried to object, but Nate's voice cut through him like a knife. These funds, totaling over $120,000, were siphoned from marital assets. My client was left with a mere $700 to his name, while Ms. Turner absconded to Spain. Rachel's face tightened, but Nate wasn't done. He pulled out printed emails between Rachel and Denise, the ones where they mocked me as unstable and broke, plotting how to keep Evan away from me. "This," Nate said, holding up a page, "shows intent not just to abandon my client, but to erase him from his child's life." When the judge spoke, her tone was firm. "Given the evidence of financial misconduct and abandonment, I am freezing all accounts under Ms. Turner's name until further review. Temporary full custody of the minor child, Evan Turner, is granted to Mr. Turner." Rachel's mouth fell open. Denise, sitting in the back row, glared at me like I had just burned their perfect world to the ground. After the hearing, I walked out with Nate, still in shock. My phone buzzed. Rachel's name lit up the screen. I answered, thinking maybe she'd apologize or at least show a flicker of humanity. "You think you won?" she screamed, her voice high and cracking. "You won't keep him. You hear me? This isn't over." I didn't respond. I just hung up. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. I could breathe again, knowing Evan was safe with me. At least for now. But Nate's face was grim. "Don't celebrate yet," he warned. "People like Denise don't quit when they lose in court. Expect her to play dirty." He was right. The next day, Nate called again. "We've discovered someone sent a series of emails to Rachel's employer in Barcelona, from an account with your name. They're trying to make it look like you're harassing her." I felt my stomach drop. "Denise?" I asked. "Most likely," Nate said. "But this might backfire. If we prove it was her, it'll only strengthen your case." That night, I watched Evan sleep, his small chest rising and falling like nothing in his world had changed. But mine had. Rachel and Denise weren't just fighting me in court. They were twisting every knife they could find. I decided right then that I'd match them, step for step, until there was nothing left for them to take. The days after the court hearing felt like walking on thin ice, quiet, but tense. Rachel's side wasn't done, and I knew it. Nate and his team worked around the clock, digging through every trace of Rachel and Denise's finances. Then Laura came through again. She handed Nate documents showing that Rachel and Mark had funneled more than just our savings into offshore accounts. There were transactions tied to a trust fund Denise had set up years ago, a stash of money hidden from everyone. "This isn't just a family spat anymore," Nate said as he looked through the files. "This is fraud, and Denise's fingerprints are all over it." With that, Nate filed motions to initiate a full forensic audit of Denise's accounts. When the subpoenas hit, I could practically hear Denise's rage through the phone as she left voicemails calling me ungrateful and pathetic. I didn't listen to all of them. I just saved them. Every bitter word, every threat, because Nate told me to keep stacking evidence. Meanwhile, Rachel's perfect life in Barcelona was starting to crumble. She had tried spinning the custody battle as a misunderstanding, but Nate's team leaked court documents showing the offshore accounts and the abandonment case. Her employer wasn't pleased. Within a week, she was fired for failing to disclose her ongoing legal issues. Rachel texted me in all caps, "You did this! You ruined me!" I stared at the message for a long time, then put the phone down without replying. She had ruined herself. I was done taking the blame. The final blow came when Nate uncovered that the fake emails sent to Rachel's employer, the ones meant to look like I'd been harassing her, had originated from Denise's IP address. We presented this to the court, and the judge didn't hold back. Fraud charges were officially filed against Denise, and her credibility was shot to pieces. Rachel tried to spin it all, calling me late one night, crying and saying Denise was just trying to protect her. I didn't say a word. I simply hung up and forwarded her call log to Nate. Every desperate move she made only tightened the noose. When the next court date arrived, Rachel looked like a shadow of herself. No confident smirk, no polished blazer, just a tired woman with nothing left to throw at me. Nate laid out the timeline, the fraud, and the offshore accounts, and the judge gave Rachel a choice: continue fighting and face criminal charges or settle. She broke. Right there, in front of everyone, Rachel signed over full custody of Evan. I could barely process it as Nate handed me the paperwork, whispering, "It's over. You won." Afterward, I sat in my truck. The documents spread across the dashboard. My hands shook, but not from fear this time. It was relief, sharp and overwhelming. I'd fought like hell for my son, and I'd won. But even with Rachel cornered and Denise exposed, the damage they'd done still lingered. I knew I'd carry the scars for years: the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the constant fear of losing Evan. Still, as I drove home that night, Evan's laughter in the back seat, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt free. 3 months later, life looked different. Quieter. Steadier. The settlement Nate secured wasn't huge, but with the recovered funds and the frozen accounts finally released, I had enough to start over. I bought a small 2-bedroom house in Troutdale. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Evan's room was painted sky blue, covered with dinosaur decals and shelves for all his Legos. Watching him unpack his toy trucks that first day, I felt like I'd finally given him something solid to hold on to. Work came back slowly. A contractor I used to work with in Portland called and offered me a steady job on rewiring a series of new builds. It felt good to put on my tool belt again, to feel like I wasn't just surviving, but rebuilding piece by piece. Every paycheck I earned felt like another brick in the wall, separating us from the chaos Rachel left behind. Evan thrived in his new school. His teacher told me he was the kid who always shares his crayons, which made me laugh and ache at the same time. Some evenings, we'd sit at the kitchen table while he showed me his homework, his tongue poking out slightly as he traced letters. It was in those moments, the simple, ordinary ones, that I realized how close I'd come to losing this. Rachel called twice in the first month, then less and less. The conversations were short and awkward. She'd ask about Evan, but it was like she didn't know what to say to her own son anymore. He'd hold the phone, stare at it for a second, then hand it back to me. "Can I go play now, Dad?" he'd ask, and I'd nod. One night, sitting on the porch with a cold beer, I thought about that first text from Rachel. Moving to Barcelona with Mark, good luck with bills. Back then, it felt like the end of everything. Now it just felt hollow. Like some bad joke I'd finally stopped taking seriously. Evan came running outside with his trucks, his cheeks flushed and hair sticking up from a day of play. "Dad, watch this!" he shouted, sending one of the trucks zooming down the steps. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my beer. We'd made it through the storm, just the two of us. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail from a law office in Portland. It was from Denise's lawyer. The tone was polite, even apologetic, an attempt to smooth things over now that she was facing fraud charges. I read the first few lines, then folded the letter and dropped it straight in the trash. It was too late for apologies. Denise had played her part in trying to break us, and I wasn't about to let her rewrite history. That night, after putting Evan to bed, I sat alone on the porch, staring at the quiet street. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was bracing for another hit. I realized Rachel's betrayal hadn't broken us. If anything, it had made me stronger, made us stronger. The fire pit crackled as I tossed the last of Rachel's letters onto the flames. They curled and blackened, words disappearing into smoke like they'd never mattered. Evan sat beside me on the porch, his legs swinging while he worked on the burger I'd grilled for him. He had ketchup on his cheek and a smile that made everything feel simple again. "Dad, can we camp out here tonight?" he asked, pointing to the yard with his half-eaten burger. "Maybe this weekend," I said with a grin. "I'll even let you stay up past bedtime if you help me with s'mores." He laughed, the sound carrying into the quiet evening. There was something healing about these moments. Just us, the smell of burgers and smoke. No shadows from the past creeping in. As the fire dimmed, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. It was Nate. I stepped inside to take the call. "It's done," he said. "Denise settled out of court on the fraud charges. She's keeping her head down now. You won't hear from her again." I leaned against the kitchen counter, a long breath leaving me. "So that's it?" "That's it," Nate said. "Enjoy your life, man. You earned it." When I hung up, I looked around the house. The Lego piles on the coffee table, the drawings taped to the fridge, the scuffed boots by the door. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd stopped looking over my shoulder. I went back outside, where Evan had abandoned his burger in favor of racing his toy trucks down the porch steps. I sat down next to him, watching the flames fade to embers. "You know," I said, "we're going to be okay. Better than okay." Evan gave me a curious look, like he was trying to figure out why I was smiling. "We already are, Dad," he said, and went back to his trucks. Later that night, after I tucked him into bed, I sat in the dark living room, listening to the quiet. It wasn't the silence of an empty house anymore. It was peace. I didn't need closure from Rachel. I didn't need an apology from Denise. I had Evan, and I had a life I built with my own hands, free from the chaos they'd tried to leave me in. Maybe that was the real victory, surviving and building something better.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.